intelligence operations was in a prisoner, and he knew that the Russians were looking for him and for others who had been involved in Russian affairs, which were horrible. No one suffered more in World War II than Russia. They lost 25 million people, and they were not in a very forgiving state of mind when dealing with Nazis. So they knew that if the Russians got them, they were dead men. So Reinhard Gehlen, a diabolical genius, master of deception, proposed to his commanding officer that he be allowed to approach American military and offer them an exchange of resources and personnel in return for protection from the Russians. And in an unauthorized procedure, an American general of German descent, General Siebert, made this agreement with Reinhard Gehlen, and he took Gehlen and he took his intelligence network, and through Army channels and Operation Paperclip, facilitated the emigration of thousands of Nazis into the United States who were given jobs in both intelligence and rocketry. I'd like to interject a very interesting point, and it deals with the nature of the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, and its name. I often wondered why NASA and Central Intelligence Agency are not called the United States Intelligence Agency or the United States Space Agency, and are called NASA and CIA. It turns out that in 1943, as the Germans saw themselves losing the war, they had to reorganize their industry and their military under Albert Speer, who wrote Inside the Third Reich, and that's where I get this information. And Hitler had a meeting with Himmler and Speer and von Braun, and it was decided to join the rocketry, the rocket and scientific development section, with the intelligence section, and form a new group called the Middle Work. And Middle Work means the Central Works. So I believe that that's exactly where the name Central Intelligence comes from.
Very interesting.
Yeah, Middle Work. Mittel, Central, same thing. M-I-T-T-E-L in German is Central. So they re-engineered our military in their image. And as a result, their doctrines, their methodology, their standard operating procedures were learned and inculcated in our intelligence and science departments. And I consider that a virus. I consider it a Nazi virus that propagated through the minds of individuals who underwent the training. And though the Nazis have passed and gone away, it's as if they left a lot of robots programmed with their programs, running around, dictating policy beyond their precepts and their ideas. And so it's kind of like a robot that has outlived its masters and is perpetuating old programs that have outlived their usefulness. And I see that slowly changing in what's happened in the last couple of years to both organizations, NASA and Central Intelligence. The mind control apparatus came in because, quite frankly, America and the American military was flabbergasted at the heinous things that they discovered the German people were induced to perform in the name of patriotism and country. And they couldn't understand how rational human beings could go so far in diabolical acts. And they thought, this must be an aberration of the German psychology, the German psyche. Well, lo and behold, over years of time, we found out, no, it's not an aberration of German psychology. It's every human being subjected to the same program will perform the same way. And the most recent evidence of it is in this French program that was exposed about 2 months ago, where the audience was told that they would be pressed a button to to electrocute a guy if he gave the wrong answer, and they went along with it, and they were actually pushing the button to lethal levels. And this was a replication of an experiment that had been done in Connecticut at Yale in the 1960s, when this hypothesis was tested to see if Americans were really that different from Germans. And it was found that no, human beings, a human being is willing to do anything he's ordered to as long as he's been authorized to do it, and the authority is willing to take the responsibility. So we are quite willing to surrender our responsibility for our actions to a quote-unquote higher authority who will validate it and accept the ultimate responsibility. And that's the same problem that we are having with the tortures in Guantanamo and the psychologists who signed it. And even on another level, on the juridical level, with John Yoo and Bybee, these judges who endorsed torture. They kind of engineered a legal argument to circumvent the Constitution. And I hope to see these gentlemen. I don't call them gentlemen, actually. I'm being too courteous. I would like to see these criminals go to jail. The Constitution is the most sacred document in our experience. Our freedoms, our rights rest on that document. And to have people in the so-called Justice Department circumventing it, writing briefs to legitimize crimes, it's horrendous. And those people have to be brought to justice. So the mind control program, the mind control program branched out, and it became the standard program for indoctrinating individuals in our intelligence services and in science. And from CIA, through contacts in academia, they gained control of departments of all the departments, basically. To get a degree, you had to conform standard, and psychology, psychiatry, all of these so-called mental health regimes or disciplines were recruited to do the work. Psychiatry was hijacked and recruited to debunk ufology and UFO witnesses, to create a vocabulary of mental illness, to define these experiences that people were having as delusional or psychotic or schizoid. And they became control apparatus. They got control of the news media by planting CIA reporters in actually every major media instrument: television, radio, newspapers. And that list was found out a couple of years ago of how many people were working for the CIA during this epoch of the age of assassinations, and from President Kennedy's assassination on.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So when you talk about the mind control, and you're talking about the CIA and they're implementing it, and of course now it's become group mind control, right? So they're dealing with populations, large populations, and so on. And of course, the television is a huge tool in that regard.
Yeah. And the Zapruder film was the first great vehicle for that, The Zapruder film was the first mass hallucination that was successfully implanted, and I'm still battling against it, It's really
absolutely. Well, what is your familiarity with MJ-12? What used to be called MJ-12?
Well, I would say I'm a little more familiar with the history than most because I've studied it for so long. But basically, I do believe it. I believe that it started right at the end of World War II. That the nucleus of it dealt with having to defeat the Japanese, and that it naturally evolved into dealing with another alien culture. Because you see, Japanese culture was as alien to us as extraterrestrials are to us now. And dealing with the Japanese